Hey, hello, and welcome to this episode of Learn Everyday English, your roadway to English proficiency. Glad to have you with me again today. We got a different topic. I'm going to be talking about something you've probably heard in the news. I think it's been all over the news internationally, and it's talking about the war, I could say, that's being waged between Mexico and the United States, or the United States and Mexico. I know there's another issue brewing or going on between Canada and the U.S., but I'm going to focus this episode on Mexico and the U.S., and it has to do with tariffs, fentanyl, and weapons. But before we get into that, there's 3 things that you can do for me. Hey, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and 3, tell your friends about it so that they can benefit from these videos too, just like you. And remember, I have my ebook out on Amazon, How to Talk Texan. You can check it out. Go to one of the links below in the description and get you a copy of that. And also, if you want to buy me a cup of coffee, you can click on the link below and help support this channel so that I can keep bringing you videos like this, help you learn and improve your English, or just learn about things that are going on in the world, comprehensible input, and that type of thing. So I'm not going to belabor the point. I just want to get into the topic of today. So this situation started brewing a while back, we could say a while back, and Donald Trump, our new president here in the United States, was saying that he was possibly going to impose tariffs on certain countries, especially Mexico and Canada and China. And he's been talking about that and said it was going to be 25% tariffs to Mexico, products that are made in Mexico and brought into the United States. Same for Canada, 25% tariff for goods brought in from Canada, and 10% on goods coming in from China. So there was talk, speculation. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen, if it was going to happen, when it was going to happen. But recently, then Donald Trump came out and said he was going to proceed with the tariffs, and they were going to go into effect. I think it was Tuesday. Today is February 4th. I think today was the day that the tariffs were supposed to go into effect. But something happened on Monday, February 3rd, and Claudia Sheinbaum, who is the fairly new president of Mexico, and Donald Trump, they had a phone call meeting, and I wanted to go over what happened in that phone call. There's a lot of information floating around here in the media, and I know to go back a step, when Trump first talked about imposing tariffs on Mexico, the president of Mexico said, well, tariffs aren't going to solve the problem. We just need to try to talk this over like adults and try to come to a resolution that we can all agree on. I think she probably never heard anything back from the U.S. government about that and Donald Trump's team. And I know Donald Trump wanted Mexico to help with the immigration issue, the people coming in across the border, wanted Mexico to help with the flow of fentanyl type of drug that's coming into the U.S. And it's creating a lot of problems here for people in the U.S. But part of the problem is there's a great demand here. The drug here, people want it, people are buying it, people are distributing the drug here and selling it. So part of the onus, we say, or the responsibility or the problem exists here in the United States, to be honest, because there's demand here. Mexico does have a part to play in the production of fentanyl. I think I've read the chemicals that are used to make fentanyl are coming from China. And China, I read some articles, actually sends some of the drugs to the U.S., or maybe a lot of the precursor chemicals to the U.S. and some to Mexico, but a lot into the U.S., which I didn't know. And then from the U.S., they're being smuggled into Mexico. So the U.S. needs to do a better job of stopping that. But chemicals are going to Mexico. Then they manufacture the fentanyl in Mexico, and then they distribute it back up through the border into the United States. So I think Mexico can do a better job in preventing that flow of the drug coming up, and the U.S. can do a better job of stopping the precursor chemicals going into Mexico and do a better job of enforcing the drug use here in this country, because if there's not such a high demand, the drugs wouldn't be coming in. But that's maybe a video for another day, another time. And then another thing that Claudia Sheinbaum mentioned in her response to Donald Trump a while back, she said that the U.S. needs to do a lot more and help prevent the interest of weapons coming into Mexico. That's creating a huge problem for Mexico because it's arming the cartel members, and it's making it difficult for the Mexican police and maybe National Guard to combat these cartel members, because they have such, we say, large amount of firepower, weapons that are coming into the U.S. And I wasn't aware of that, but it's a huge problem, and she's right about that. The U.S. needs to do a much better job of policing weapons coming into Mexico. Because Mexico, if you didn't know, it's very difficult, very, very difficult to get a gun or a weapon in Mexico. I think I read there's only one store, you could say, or location where people can buy a weapon or guns. And then those that do have to have certain permission and say why they want, maybe for hunting or sport purposes. But it's very difficult, and they don't really manufacture any guns or not many guns in Mexico. So most of the weapons that are finding their way into Mexican drug cartel hands come, the vast majority, and we're going to get into that, come from the United States. So we play a big part in this whole problem as well. But I want to start off with the meeting that was held on February 3rd, which was Monday, on the phone call that was held between Claudia Sheinbaum, president of Mexico, and Donald Trump, the president of the United States. And I got this information from the Mexican government website, and they actually had a transcription in Spanish of the actual Claudia Sheinbaum held a press conference. And she explained to the Mexican people exactly what happened and transpired on the phone call that she had with Donald Trump. So this is coming directly from the Mexican government in Spanish. So I read through that, and then I kind of translated it myself, but used other translation sources just to make sure that what I'm going to be telling you was accurate. So here's actually what happened on the telephone call between Claudia Sheinbaum and Donald Trump in her words exactly, because what we're hearing from our side, Donald Trump said they had a meeting. Claudia Sheinbaum was going to do certain things, but he kind of left out something that was important, I think. So I'm just going to summarize this briefly. So Claudia Sheinbaum said, yeah, she had she had a phone call with Donald Trump. And she said she had been looking forward to having a conversation with him. And she said the conversation lasted more than half an hour, maybe 3/4 of an hour, or something like that, she said. So about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. So that's a pretty long conversation for heads of countries to have. So I think that speaks a lot about what they talked about. Then she said that they went on to talk about about the interest he had also about reducing the trafficking of fentanyl that takes place from Mexico into the United States and other drugs as well, not just fentanyl. And then he said he made several proposals, and then they reached an agreement that Mexico was going to put more National Guards on the northern border to protect the border and prevent drug trafficking, and in particular the trafficking of fentanyl from Mexico to the United States. So that's what they talked about, and Mexico agreed to send National Guard troops to the U.S. border, and I think the number is 10,000 troops. So to me, and actually I read also that this is really not anything monumental because in 2021, Joe Biden met with the Mexican government and I guess the president at that time, AMLO, and they sent 10,000 troops to the U.S. border to do the same thing. So, I think we didn't really need a threat of tariffs to get this done. We could just sit down, like I said, like adults and speak to each other and talk to each other. This could have been worked out without all the pomp and circumstance. But she said she also wanted to raise several issues with him. But she also said, explain to him the seriousness of the amount of high-powered weapons that enter Mexico from the United States, and that these high-powered weapons that arrive illegally because they arm criminal groups and give them firepower. And that she asked Donald Trump that the United States will help Mexico to prevent arms trafficking from the U.S. to Mexico. And she said that Donald Trump agreed. And I find that interesting because all the news reports that we have here in the United States with Donald Trump talking and, just in general, focus on Mexico providing the 10,000 troops to the border. But I haven't heard a single news report saying that Donald Trump agreed, as the president of Mexico said in their meeting, to help work with them on preventing the illegal trafficking of arms into Mexico, which he agreed was a problem. So I thought that was good that she was able to get him to agree on that. And finally, he insisted on the issue of the trade deficit. And she said, well, I really don't think it's really a deficit. It's just how trade agreements go. Donald Trump is upset that I think we sell more goods we buy more Mexican goods from Mexico than Mexico buys from us. But in any type of trade agreement, there's going to be an imbalance. It can't be 50-50. One side is always going to maybe sell more. One side is going to buy more. So, you can't have it a perfect agreement. And then they talked about putting an action plan in place to meet and get things done. And Donald Trump apparently agreed that he would put a task force together and someone to work with Mexico on a joint task force. And then in the case of trade, she said, she made a proposal to him. Why don't we put the Mexican Secretary of Economy and his Secretary of Commerce for the U.S. to work together? And Donald Trump agreed. And then Donald Trump asked her how long did she want. She paused. She said, well, let's pause forever. And he pressed the issue and asked again, well, how long? And she said, well, okay, let's put a pause for 1 month on the tariffs. So Donald Trump agreed that he would pause the tariffs for 1 month, and Mexico would work on the troops coming to the border to stop fentanyl. And then apparently he agreed that he would start working on the problem of guns being illegally moved into Mexico from the United States, and they would meet back maybe within a month or more before 1 month and see how things are going. And both sides would have input. So that was the agreement that was actually made between Donald Trump and Claudia Sheinbaum based on the actual description from Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico. So that's what's going on at the moment right now. So the tariffs have been put on hold with Mexico, pending, meeting to come within about 1 month. So now the updated story on the tariffs actually between Mexico and the United States. Then I also did some research about the fentanyl issue because I've heard it's in the news. I know it's been devastating here in the United States, but what's really going on? So I found an article online by the Cato Institute that was put out in September 14th, 2022. You might want to maybe look at that for yourself. And because I think there's a narrative that's going around that's false. And I'm going to get into that about fentanyl. How is fentanyl coming into the United States? Who's bringing it in? And that type of thing. But the title of the Cato report said U.S. citizens were 89% of convicted fentanyl traffickers in 2022. So by far the vast majority of people bringing fentanyl into the United States are United States citizens. They're not Mexican citizens. They're not illegal people coming in from Mexico or other countries. They're U.S. citizens. I think that the narrative that we hear in the news here is that Mexican citizens or illegals are bringing the fentanyl into the country, and that's not true. But fentanyl overdoses caused tens of thousands of preventable deaths in 2021 in the United States. And I think I have a graph here of the fentanyl deaths over the past several years, and it's just been increasing. But many politicians who want to end the U.S. asylum law claim that immigrants crossing the border illegally are responsible, and that just is not true. So I guess an NPR poll found that 39% of Americans and 60% of Republicans believe that most of the fentanyl entering the U.S. is smuggled in by unauthorized migrants crossing the border illegally, and that's not true. A more accurate summary is that fentanyl is overwhelmingly smuggled by U.S. citizens, or almost entirely for U.S. citizen consumers. So U.S. citizens are bringing the fentanyl here to be used in drugs or to be used here in the U.S. by United States citizens. So the first issue I want to go over is U.S. citizen consumers, or the people that use the fentanyl, fund the fentanyl smuggling. So U.S. consumers pay for the illicit opioids when they buy the drugs. So they fund the fentanyl smuggling. So U.S. is responsible for feeding the beast. The consumers, they pay the retail drug dealers, who then pay the wholesalers, and the cash is then transferred back in bulk cash form to Mexico, and the drug cartels profit from the money. These funds are then used to pay the smugglers to bring the drugs back into the U.S., and the cycle continues and repeats again. And the best evidence indicates that 99% of U.S. consumers of fentanyl are U.S. citizens. And non-citizens appear to be about 80%, listen to this, less likely to be fentanyl consumers than their share of the population would predict. So most of the drugs are being used by U.S. citizens. Second thing is the issue of U.S. citizens are the fentanyl traffickers, or the people that are bringing fentanyl into the country, is primarily trafficked by U.S. citizens. In 2022, U.S. citizens accounted for 89% of fentanyl trafficking convictions, compared to just 8.9% for illegal immigrants. So illegal immigrants aren't the problem of bringing the fentanyl into the country, although the fentanyl is being produced in Mexico, and that's a big problem, and being organized by Mexican drug cartels, so that is a big problem. And then the issue is, a lot of people think that the immigrants are bringing fentanyl in, crossing, say, the border fences or areas that are non-border checkpoints, and that's not true. So the U.S. citizens bring the fentanyl through legal crossing points, like the legal border checkpoints where a lot of the vehicles cross. In 2023, 93% of fentanyl border seizures occurred at legal border crossings and inside of vehicle checkpoints. It's easier for U.S. citizens to cross legally than non-citizens, so it makes sense for fentanyl producers to hire U.S. citizen smugglers. So they want to hire U.S. people to bring the drugs in because it's easier for U.S. citizens to legally cross the border. The location of smuggling makes sense because hard drugs at ports of entry are at least 96% less likely to be stopped than people crossing illegally. So people crossing illegally, they're more prone to find the drugs than for people that are legal making the border crossing. The DEA reports that criminal organizations, they use the major highway systems and routes for transporting the drugs. And the most common method employed involves smuggling the drugs, like I said, through U.S. ports of entry in passenger vehicles like cars and trucks with concealed compartments, or commingled with legitimate goods or other goods in tractor trailers or semi-trucks. And several agencies, as well as the DEA, confirm they are the CBP, ICE, and DHS intelligence told Congress in May of 2022 the same thing, that hard drugs come through the ports of entry and not other illegal border crossings. Fentanyl is smuggled through official crossings specifically because it's easier to conceal on a legal traveler or in legal goods than to conceal on a person crossing the border illegally. And just to give you an idea, so a lot of the drugs, even though they're going through the legal ports of entry, are never caught. They're never found. And to give you a statistic here about cocaine, the Custom and Border Protection estimates that it caught less than 3% of cocaine smuggled at ports of entry in 2021. So less than 3% of the cocaine that's smuggled is actually caught. And they got these statistics because it's actually the only drug that is really analyzed. And another statistic, at most just 0.009% of the people arrested by Border Patrol for crossing illegally, like illegal migrants, actually had any fentanyl at all. So it's just a negligible amount of fentanyl is being carried by illegal immigrants. So that whole narrative is not true. So then I found another website. It was part of the infographics by a group called the Mexico Institute. And the title of the article was Infographics, Arms Trafficking Across the U.S. Border, dated February 13, 2024. And here are some of the statistics. So Mexican Attorney General of the Republic of Mexico and the United States, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, AFT, they had a joint effort to track and trace the origin and number, and this now has to do with trafficking of firearms or illegal weapons that are coming into the U.S. from Mexico. So these two groups from Mexico and the U.S. ATF had a joint effort to trace the origin and the number of firearms in Mexico coming from or through the United States. So the Mexican group, they found that 70 to 90%, listen to this, 70 and 90% of traced firearms in Mexico originated from and passed through the U.S. And the ATF, the U.S. agency, also did their own study, and they estimated that it was about 68% of the firearms in Mexico came from or through the United States, so almost 70%. So they were very close. So that's the majority of firearms and illegal weapons in Mexico, found in Mexico, came from or through the United States. Did you know that? I didn't know that was that high. Then finally, there was a program on the television by CBS News, and I did see this, I think, on part of a YouTube video maybe 6 months ago or so, about how the Mexican drug cartels get the weapons and smuggle the weapons from the U.S. into Mexico. It was very fascinating, and you might want to try to find that on YouTube. I think the title of the show or article may be Mexican Drug Cartels Pay Americans to Smuggle Weapons Across the Border, Intelligence Documents Show. And here's kind of, think, one graphic that shows how the Mexican cartel works. They hire people. They have a name for them. And then they pay these people, usually U.S. citizens who are legal. They go to, say, maybe sporting goods stores, gun shops. They buy guns and weapons. Then they transfer them to a kind of a middleman, a broker dealer. And then the broker dealer sends them up the chain to another person. They eventually end up finding their way onto big semi-tractor trailer trucks. And then they cross the border into Mexico. And that's how they do it. And here's another graphic showing there's the different points of where the legal weapons are congregated and put on these semi-trucks. And it's all over the country, as you can see. And then they're taken down the U.S. down south and cross the border into Mexico. So this is quite a, maybe quite an operation, I could say. So here's what the report from CBS News found. Mexican drug cartels have been smuggling a vast arsenal of even military-grade weapons out of the U.S. with the help of American citizens. So these are not Mexican citizens or illegal immigrants as well bringing the weapons into Mexico. They're U.S. citizens that are being paid or part of working for and helping the Mexican drug cartels. U.S. intelligence documents and interviews with half a dozen current and former officials of the U.S. reveal that the American government has known about this problem for years, but sources says it's done little to stop those weapons trafficking networks inside the U.S. So again, this is a problem that's existed for years, and it's not just a Democratic or Republican issue. It's like a problem and that both parties here in the U.S. have ignored. So both share responsibility. We just need to try to get this resolved. The report also goes on to say dozens of cartel networks operate like terrorist cells here in the U.S. They pay the Americans to buy money from the guns and weapons from gun stores and also online dealers all across the country as far north as Wisconsin and even Alaska, according to U.S. intelligence sources. The firearms are then shipped across the southwest border through a chain of brokers and couriers. CBS News said they pressed the Justice Department of the U.S. about the findings, and a senior official there confirmed that we absolutely recognize the problem here and that the lion's share of firearms trafficked to Mexican cartels are coming from the United States. So here's an admission from a Justice Department senior official confirming and admitting that they realize that the majority of firearms trafficked to and end up in the hands of the Mexican cartels come from the United States. The free flow of American guns across the southern border empowers the cartel to protect their drug operations, and they outgun the Mexican authorities, the U.S. official said. So the Mexicans, they may send their police force or National Guard, but when they get there and to confront the cartels, they find out that the cartels have better weapons, more weapons than they do. They're just outgunned. So that's a serious problem. And a gentleman by the name of Chris Dimlin, who served as senior special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, ATF, said this. He said, "We have allowed the cartels to amass an army. We have allowed the cartels to amass an army." So there was a project called Project Thor, and it said that it was studying this problem, and they found that the problem of cartel weapons was far worse than previously understood, far worse. They estimated that the cartels were trafficking between, listen to this, 250,000 and 1 million weapons every year. Let me say that again, 250,000 to 1 million weapons every year with a retail value of $500 million, not including ammunition and tactical supplies, according to intelligence analysis reviewed by CBS News. So as you can see, there's a big problem going on between the U.S. and Mexico, and I think both countries share responsibility about the fentanyl crisis and the trafficking of illegal weapons. So that's kind of the latest that I found that's going on with the tariff war, you could say, between Mexico and the U.S. To sum it up, it's been put on hold for 1 month, pending Mexico sending troops, 10,000 National Guard troops to the U.S. border to help halt and stop the flow of fentanyl going across the border into the U.S. And Donald Trump said he would start and try to help get something going and moving on stopping the illegal flow of weapons from the U.S. into Mexico. And they're going to meet in 1 month or before 1 month and analyze, talk and see how things are going. And if things are going well, then I think there won't be any tariffs that will be imposed onto Mexico. And I think if that does end up happening, Mexico then is going to impose tariffs on the U.S. and that's not going to be good for either country. Both countries are going to pay the price and cost of goods are going up and up. Just wanted to close with one thing, and I think some people were surprised that Donald Trump, said he was going to stop the tariff so quickly. And I think that had to do with there was a lot of pushback, a lot of outcry and complaints from the people here in the U.S. about the tariffs. They were going to cause a lot of pain and suffering. Price of goods were going to go up. And just the mention of tariffs caused the stock market to suffer. And I think with all those problems, he realized that this may not have been the best idea, and then maybe try to focus on a better way to resolve the issue. So I'm glad that did happen. So time will tell what's going to happen, and we'll see what's going to happen with the tariffs with Canada. And I haven't heard an update on tariffs with China. So we say time will tell, time will tell. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hope you learned something new and got some updates on what's going on. So stay tuned and listen to the news to see what's going to happen in the future. So like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell your friends about it. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Learn Everyday English, and we'll see you later. Goodbye.